Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I think thanks for coming, guys. Well, I'll keep an eye on the lobby just for people attending because we've got a few minutes yet. And yeah, we'll get started in a few minutes. Cool. Yeah, so Giles, thanks for agreeing to the session. I know I hounded you a little bit from
That's all right.
last year after seeing you do UX London. I think you just mainly adapting that session, is it?
Yeah, I'm going to review that session that I did, that talk I did. I haven't done it digitally yet on online, so that could be quite interesting to see if it's see if it works. But I think there's a good message to be had within it. I got a lot of good feedback from it. UX London, so I thought it's a good opportunity to share a bit further.
I see Lee Summerfield, thanks for joining. I've just seen he's popped up. He did the last UX session for me.
Oh, great. Hey,
I was hoping that Lee would pop up. Because keen to see how it dovetails with what you're going to talk about, Giles. It could be quite interesting.
Afternoon, Billy.
Hi, Lee.
You all right?
Yeah, good. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks very much. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you came. I was just saying, I'm keen for you to hear maybe slightly different perspective.
Cool. Great stuff.
But yeah, I mean, I'll keep an eye on the admin side of things. This is the first one I've done through Teams. I normally do it through Zoom, so apologies if there's any teething issues. But I'll hand over to Giles. Maybe you can do a bit of an intro on yourself, and I don't know if you want to maybe filibuster for a few minutes before you get into the meat of it, just to allow for the stragglers.
Yeah, it's a bit harsh calling them stragglers, but yeah, I can filibuster, no problem. Cool. Thanks for coming, everyone. So yeah, my name is Giles Airy. I'm a principal designer at Every. I appreciate we're not very popular as a brand, but we are trying. We are trying to deliver 700 million parcels a year, and it's pretty tricky. But we're investing a lot in the digital side of things at the moment. So fingers crossed, we'll make some great strides over the next year. So my background, a bit about me really as to why I'm here. I've always classed myself as a designer, I suppose, really. The reason why I say designer is because I've been involved in a lot of different areas in design since 97, when I got my first sort of placement at university when I was at Saatchi & Saatchi when I was at university. And from then on, I went on to just start off in graphic design, small little studio in Covent Garden, marketing property mainly, big sort of office complex, which was pretty cool. And got into that's when web started to take off quite a bit as well, which was interesting. It was just me and a mate just hacking together websites for the company I worked for as a bit of a freelance thing, really. And then I was 5 or 6 years there. I think the important thing I learned there was really all about communication. And I think that's a real staple of how I approach design. It's an obvious thing to say, but it's something that people don't often grasp as well as they potentially should, considering the industry we are in. So I moved from London. I went to New Zealand, pursued a bit of a dream over there, and ended up. I spent the first year actually in a packaging design, which was pretty fascinating, learning about constraints within my design process. Obviously, you think about printing process and all that sort of thing, and various substrates. It teaches you like another string to your bow on what is possible, what's not possible, how to work around things, how to just accept the way certain things are, and therefore you've got to come up with solutions in terms of the final output. So that was interesting. I think that's something I've seen as a common thread all throughout my career, is you always have to deal with some sort of constraints. So that was my first real encounter with not being able to design fundamentally whatever I wanted to, I suppose. And then I moved into an advertising agency, slightly more creative, and that was still in New Zealand, and that was interesting. That was moving in a place called Hamilton in the centre of the North Island, and I moved from there. I worked up to my first main area as creative director. I ended up being there, and that was fascinating because we got to work on so much diverse stuff, marketing, sporting events, various newfangled inventions, fun, all sorts of stuff that was coming out of New Zealand at the time, innovative stuff, a lot of FMCG stuff, law practices, etc., etc. And that was great. And I was there for about 5 or 6 years. Eventually moved back to the UK and just got into as an associate creative director at a digital company called Session Digital, and they're basically designing e-commerce websites predominantly. And that's when I started to get into this world of UX. You're talking probably about 11, 12 years ago now. And that was mainly because my experience in how brands communicate with people and end users, which is what I did a lot of in the advertising industry, particularly as the bottom dropped out of advertising. We ended up converting the advertising company into more of a brand management company. So I started to pick up that and then move into UX, and worked at a company called Invica for about 9 years, predominantly as associate creative director, but then mainly as design director in a UX capacity. And unfortunately, like a lot of people, got made redundant at the end of COVID, 7 months furlough. That was a bit of a pain. But then picked up a role working at TalkTalk for 20 months, which was a designer, which was fascinating. My first in-house role, and very different pace. A lot of the issues of still clearly communicating, probably even more problematic, I've always found at client side, due to the fact that I feel there isn't the necessary commercial urgency that you might have an agency side, where people are basically paying for your time. Client side, people tend to there's not the urgency there to actually get things done. So I find that a bit frustrating. I've learned to deal with that. And then after 20 months, I moved across to Every. Now I'm principal designer within the team, and I specialise mainly in the customer area, and dealing with the Every app is my new project. So anyone wants to contact me on LinkedIn when they need screenshots or frustrating stories, please do. It's all good research. So that's mainly my background. Other than my just general day-to-day job, done a lot of stuff over the time. I set up a group to help people get into the industry during COVID. We sort of tongue-in-cheek called it the Game Changers. I noticed Crystal Gaskell's from here today. Actually, she's from the group, so it's nice to have her here. And over that time, I've helped around about 35 people get into the industry, and that was just something I did because I felt people needed a hand, and I had time on my hands at the time when I was on furlough, and doing a lot of talking, speaking, did various events, presentations such as this. Recently did a presentation at London Live, UX Live in London back in December, and that's a presentation I'm going to run through today. And other than that, I'm a lead instructor at BrainStation, teaching the Fundamentals UX course, which I really enjoy, actually. It's nice to get involved and help people, again, who's far afield, sort of Canada, US, mainly North America, but it's quite an exciting job to do. So I'm looking forward to starting my second course, teaching that next week. So that's a bit about me, anyway, and hopefully that's filibustered enough for everyone to catch up, Billy.
Yeah,
Great.
We've got a decent. We've got 25 people in now. I'll just keep an eye on it and let anyone in.
Fantastic.
Who pops up.
Okay, so I will start to share my presentation now. These things are always vaguely problematic, aren't they, with regards double screens and presenter views and PowerPoint, so please bear with me if I get a bit muddled up. I've walked through it a bit and it worked out okay, but there's bound to be a gremlin somewhere because it creeps in. So bear with me 2 seconds. I shall present. Okay, Billy, can you see that okay? Oh, fantastic. Well, that's worked. Well, so yeah, let's make a start. So thanks everyone. I called this the U of UX. In my preamble, I mentioned a lot of companies I've worked for, a lot of things I've been experienced, and I mentioned the fact that I'm a designer, really, rather than a UX designer or an advertising designer or graphic designer and what have you, because I've worn many hats. What I found as I've gone along is that UX is sort of now starting to get at the top table. Design in many ways is at the top table in a lot of companies now. The advent of major online businesses, Apple, Google, all these sort of things, and all the network disruptors, Spotify or Uber and etc, Just Eat and all that, are really driving business. And we have now in a position as designers where we have got a vast amount of skill set, but sometimes our people skills, I've seen it, may be lacking in terms of actually getting people to understand what it is we're trying to do. So I've kind of called this delivering empathy in design. I've always believed that you can learn many programs as you possibly can, but if you haven't got your own voice, and that voice steeped in values, that voice steeped in confidence, that voice steeped in just good personal soft skills, then you're going to have trouble in actually expressing your views, expressing your opinions, and getting work done, getting it signed off, getting buy-in, getting project sponsors to believe you, and indeed support from CEOs and all that sort of stuff that we need to happen. And I think it's important to acknowledge that at the moment, with design really at the top table for once, we are largely responsible for, as designers right now, for paving the way for future designers to actually make the world a better place. And if we don't get this right, with all this power and this recognition we've got now, we could actually make a rather hindrance of it all, and people won't believe in what we're trying to achieve. So I'm just going to start off with a statement I've got here. And this is fundamentally what I believe, that the role of a designer is to give people more confidence. So just let that sink in a second. Everyone will have their different beliefs about what a designer is and what they do and how they do it, etc., etc. I've always thought that by giving people more confidence, we get people on our side. We get people in agreement with us. We get people relaxed. I've been in meetings and agencies when I have seen people present and just seen, could be a developer presenting a piece of work, and there's no criticism on them. They just potentially haven't left the client with ultimate confidence that a project's going to be done correctly, because their people skills maybe haven't been as tight as they possibly could have done, because they haven't left them with confidence, because that person who they're presented to has to then go to the next person above them and ask them for more money for the next sprint, let's say. But if they can't do it in a confident way, if they can't be comfortable with what they're presenting to those people, they're going to get into sticky situations where they're not going to have funds released to get the project underway. So you may agree with this. That's fine. Everyone's different. But I want you to think about a little bit about situations you've been in with colleagues, meetings with developers, meetings with stakeholders, designers, maybe even users when you've been doing interviews. How confident are you that you've made an impact in that meeting? How confident are you that you've left that meeting thinking, yeah, people listen to me there. Yeah, I'm okay with that. That you know what your next steps are. That they thought, yeah, that's a good person to have on the team. I'm glad that person's on my team, because that's where we need to be as designers right now. We need people to have a lot of confidence that we're on their team and we're on their side. And I believe that a lot of this is steeped in values. I spoke a second ago about values in my bit of preamble. This talk is about values, and it's about how they actually deliver that confidence and help people find their voice. I've always said, I think, designers have to find their voice as individuals. We don't want to be cookie cutter people that come out of all these boot camps thinking exactly the same way and trying to deliver all these user maps and the journey and the empathy maps, all these other terminology, the double diamond, etc., etc., etc. If you can stand up and say, I'm a designer, this is what I stand for, then that will be steeped in your own values, and that will be delivered with confidence, and people will have confidence in the fact that you're on their side. You're not there to bamboozle them with acronyms and expressions that they don't understand. You're there to be a person designing something with another person and just trying to find answers. Because when the pressure comes on, it's your values that stand up, and it's these that will help you find your voice. And as people on this call today, people like myself, as we look to progress in our careers, we are going to have pressure-filled moments. So when I first experienced this, the need to understand my own values rather than just meandering through and trying to just impress people with beautiful designs and etc., etc. It was about 13 years ago, and it was my first role as a leader when I was in New Zealand, and I was helping running this advertising company as a creative director. I had a mentor at the time. It was a guy that I brought along from Approach, that I'd actually worked with, who was one of the joint owners of Ogilvy in Wellington, South Island, and he was talking to me about how I come across and how I present myself and what I want to be as a leader, and he pointed me in the direction of Simon Sinek and his TED talk and how great leaders inspire action. And I want to just touch on that a little bit, because it will put into context what I'm trying to deliver here and talk about here. So what's important, I must stress here, this is not a talk about Simon Sinek. There's enough of those out there already. So let's. I just want to explain a bit about
is inspiring you and figure out how you can apply project management to make that field even better.
Yeah, I love that inspiration. So we gave a lot of advice to young professionals.
I just got a bit lost then. So is someone asking a question? Okay, I'll take it as a no. So yeah, so so I threw me fractionally then. So Simon Sinek came out with the concept called the Golden Circle, and it's start with why concept. You may well have heard about it. It's a fairly standard thing that's found everywhere nowadays. And when you hear people say about finding your why, what is your why? What is the why of this, why of that? A lot of it stems from this. It's one of the most watched TED Talks in the last, well, pretty much ever. I think it's the second most watched TED Talk. It's about 18, 19 minutes long. It's worth investment of your time, I would say. So it was really about, if you understand who you are. So if I said, so if someone says to you, you know, what do you do? Oh, well, I'm a designer. Ooh, okay, great. Well, how do you design things then? Oh, I just design things on my computer on Figma and talking to clients and solving problems. And you know, well, I suppose why do you do that then? You don't really. Well, I just wanted to be a designer, really. Well, that was interesting. Okay, it's not really a compelling argument, and I feel sometimes when phrased like that, it has a lack of resonance and a lack of authenticity, and that's a key word I want to stress in this presentation, is authenticity. And the whole idea of Simon Sinek is saying, if you start with why, so if you say to someone, you know, why do you do what you do? And I can start to, and I did work with a mentor, like I explained, and also did more with other design leaders. I attended conferences and all this sort of stuff, tried to understand a bit more about myself. And I found out actually that why I do, what is my why is, everything I do, I genuinely try and help people. I've always looked back now, and it's always been that way. It's probably the reason why I'm here. It's the reason why I set up the Game Changers, like I spoke about. It's the reason why I enjoy doing teaching work at BrainStation. It's the reason why I enjoy building teams. And when designers leave my team to go and join another team and advance in their career, I'm happy for them because I've helped them progress in their career. So why? So why do I do what I do? Everything I do, I try to help people. And how do I do that? I simply try and communicate clearly as I can, and help others so there is less misunderstanding. And that's playing to the confidence piece that I spoke about before. That if you try and explain things clearly, it gives people confidence. And what do? Well, I just happen to be a designer. You know, to be frank, you could do the why and the how, and I could be a lawyer, or why and the how could be the same, and I could be a mathematician. So it's really important for me to have understood my why, because what that's done, that has led me on to many different meetings with, like I say, life coaches, with mentors, with line managers, and it's also helped me work a lot on my personal values as well. And this is obviously about values, and since working out my why, I've kind of worked out my two key values is empathy, and probably quite good that I'm in the industry that I am in, and also I've discovered over time that I'm fairly courageous, which is quite nice. And it's important, I think, to be honest about these things and own those things and not be too bashful about it. So, you know, I'm here today presenting. There's an empathy level there. There's a courage level there. It's not easy to present things, particularly digitally, when you can't really engage with people. And I think those sort of things have really helped me find my voice as a designer. Oops. So let me just go back again. I think I've lost the slide a second. So what we need to be mindful of, though, when you understand your values, is that they can guide you fantastically well. They can give you a voice in a meeting. They can make you realize that not your view may not be the only view. You can sit in people's shoes. For example, if I look at the empathy side of a value like I've got, or look at the courageous one as well, you know when to speak up. You're not afraid to fight for other people. But the problem with a value is that they can be our guidance, but they can also be our triggers. What I mean with that is that someone compromises your values, that will upset you. It will upset you. That happens. That happens 24/7 to everyone. That's largely why people get upset about anything, because their values are often compromised. They might not inherently understand what those values are that are being compromised, but they are compromised. But say, for example, if your value is one of justice, and you perceive yourself to be treated unfairly, you will have a red mist moment. You will have a red mist moment. You'll get annoyed. You'll and that's must have happened many, many times, I'd imagine, with a lot of us in meetings as UX professionals, or indeed people who aren't UX professionals here on the call today. Anyone who has had a red mist moment in a meeting when they felt a bit slighted, it's because one of your values is being compromised. And the problem is with when your values are compromised is you start acting on emotion, on impulse. The problem with acting on emotion, well, I don't need to explain all that to everyone. You'll start to get yourself into what I like to refer to as an unresourceful state. You won't be able to think clearly. You won't be able to make a rational decision. And going all the way back for the whole idea of UX at the top table now, that's not what we need. We need to be rational. We need to be thinking things through, not acting on emotion, and being respectful for those around us, giving them confidence, going all the way back to confidence, giving them confidence that you are on the team to understand things properly. And by using your values and being aware of when you are being compromised, it can help you manage those a lot better. Another good way of looking at it is that and one of my life coaches mentioned this, a guy called Tony Piper. Look him up on LinkedIn. He's a fantastic bloke. He mentioned that, you know, what we tend to do when we are in this unresourceful state and our values are compromised, we fight for our values and we start to project our views on people around us. And when you start to project your views on people around you, they don't like it. People don't like being bullied. And he mentioned to me a good way to do it was to imagine your eyes almost as projectors and not cameras. So you're not trying to show them all the things, all these pictures. What you're trying to do is take the information in, process it, and don't rush to impose your view on others. So even, you know, trying to avoid imposing your views on people, just soak it all in. There's a book called The Chimp Paradox, which is quite a good book that many of you might have heard of, that I found really useful in managing this sort of thing, to basically understand when your chimp's taking over versus the computer. I won't go into that book because we could be here all day and I want to move along a little bit. We have 70,000 thoughts a day. 70,000, and it's impossible to acknowledge everything because we'd all be exhausted, but they all sit there. They're all there. And when we're sitting in meetings, you've got all these positive and negative thoughts simmering under the surface. Sometimes compromise your values can act as a signpost to react to some of these more destructive ones, and that will lead to unhelpful thinking. So again, this is where I think we've got to be mindful of how we come across and how we manage and how we talk to people on projects, because people will be aware before you are. Others, let's say, if you're not saying anything, you've got some physical cues. You can interrupting people. You may have eye rolling. You may have what I like to refer to as yeah, but comments. And what happens when people have yeah, but comments? People just don't want to listen to you. And sure enough, they see that sort of stuff and they switch off. And that's not going to get anyone anywhere either. And I've been in meetings that I'm aware. I've had feedback saying that when I'm in a bad mood, even if I'm quiet about it, everyone knows about it. Everyone knows about it. And because people can easily affect situations without even saying anything. And again, so it's about managing. How do we cope with our values? How do we react when we have those red mist moments? If we're not saying something verbally, let's be mindful of our physical actions as well. A lot of it stems from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. People are probably familiar with this. This is a simple diagram to explain it. But it's all about breaking the chain when we have these kind of value compromising moments. So this is the basic diagram here, and we can see that you got thoughts lead to feelings, lead to behavior, lead to thoughts, and you get caught in the motion. Let's start on the term thoughts there. So again, if someone compromises your value, your initial thought is, you bastard. I'm not happy about that, you know. And then what you're feeling runs from that is one of annoyance, one of frustration. And then generally from that feeling triggers a behavior. And before that behavior is steeped in emotion, that behavior is steeped in a frustration. It's not steeped in rational, logical thought. And then, of course, and if you act on that behavior, then it goes into the thought and a feeling behavior, and you go 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 on. And it's a bad cycle to break. The key thing to do in these situations is to try and respond to your thought or even your feeling before they actually manifest themselves into a behavior. I would say, so what I've worked on quite a lot is making sure that if I have a negative thought about something, well, am I having that thought because I'm projecting my behaviors onto other people and they're disagreeing with it? Maybe I am. So maybe I need to try and break that chain and start to, what I like to do is start to respond to stuff rather than react to stuff. So that's when we get into reacting versus responding and how your state of mind affects your performance. Again, talking about reacting versus responding, one is steeped in emotion, the other in measured thought. So if we can kind of break the thought, we can break the reaction, we can break the chain, and we can take our time and diligently respond. And from there, if we do find ourselves reacting, not only do we become unresourceful, but we get into a state of overwhelm as well. And people do not want people in a state of overwhelm or an unresourceful state when they are supposed to be diligent, logical thinkers in the UX space that are being brought on their project. So, you know, we're all sitting here watching this, obviously the aspect of willing to learn. Many people will have aspirations to be a future leader. Well, you know, I said earlier, we can learn as many techniques or applications or processes as you want, but it's the relationships of people that's going to help or hinder this journey and get you onto the upper echelons of your industry. And starting to understand how you can respond rather than react can get you into a better state of mind and can help you become the leader you want to be. Harvard Business Review did an interesting study on leaders. They called it FATS versus SHE, FATS versus SCHE, and FAT stood for effectively frustration, anxious, tired, and stressed. And that was what some leaders were. They were frustrated, anxious, tired, and stressed. This came after a multiple amounts of study and interviews, etc., etc. And other leaders were calm, happy, and energized. So it's FATS, FATS, frustration, anxious, tired, and stressed, versus SHE, calm, happy, and energized. Obviously, more successful leaders have far more correlation with SHE. And it's something that the calm, happy, energized, that we can find if we understand how to have our voice that's aligned with our values, but also how not to allow our values to actually let us down in many ways and only energize us and the situation that we're involved with. Because as designers and people in general, we are constantly creating our own user experience of the world. So we experience the world as we see it. Then we then react to that perceived experience, just like an end user would. So, you know, people are always doing their best to on their current level of understanding. So what I mean by that is, if we're in a meeting and someone says something and you think it's daft, you just think it's stupid, there is no way has that person woken up that morning and gone, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to a meeting today and I'm going to talk absolute bollocks. And I'm going to really upset people and make everyone think I'm a complete prat. No one thinks that way at all. But all too often, I guarantee every single one of us have actually thought, God, you're talking complete bollocks, you absolute prat, behind our computer screens as someone's talking. And that's purely because people haven't got the level of understanding of a situation that you have got in that particular understanding. And so it makes no sense to you. And at times it may well go against your values. And so what you tend to do, you tend to jump to conclusions. And from there you have two options really. You can fundamentally jump into judgment and challenge them. And recently I was chatting to a group of designers and their frustrations with stakeholders. When stakeholders just don't get it, they don't get UX, they don't get what we're trying to do, and etc. etc. I said, okay, well, tell me some quotes on what do you think they don't get. And this is one option. So when people don't understand things, you have two options to respond to. One option is something like this. I'm sure a lot of people, UX people, have heard expressions such as this. So one option is to react in a way that says they want to lead on design decisions in terms of hierarchy without considering work-based solutions. Bloody quick wins. If I hear that one more time, blah, 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 blah. They don't understand UX. But they probably do understand UX. They have their own agenda. Maybe they have their own agenda. They probably just got a lot of constraints and a lot of people putting pressure on them to actually deliver a project because they've got a suite of designers, a developers sitting there, and the next sprint is going to cost them 40 grand if they do nothing. So it might not be their own agenda, their way or nothing. Well, they are paid to make the decisions, so okay, fair enough. But point is, a way of reacting is something like this. The problem is when we react like this, particularly as UX designers, we tend to get this. And this was a quote I had from a product owner. not so long ago, talking to me about a particular designer in my team, and it wasn't very good. Giles, it's my name on the project. I don't want to have to go into battle every time I speak to them. It's exhausting. Now, this was happening because this particular designer was pushing back against everything. They were reacting to everything, and they were right in their own way to react to things. They had genuine beliefs, and what they were saying was actually accurate. But the problem was the way they were saying it was rubbing everyone up the wrong way, and that person became someone people didn't want on their team. They had no confidence in them. I mean, who wants to? So we talked earlier about your own user experience. Who wants people your own user experience to be people have to go into battle with you, that they're exhausted by you? So one would argue that when you're in a situation where people are in a presentation and they are talking bollocks, they are talking nonsense, they're making no sense, they say something that you fundamentally disagree with because it compromises one of your values, one option is to have these responses and these approaches. But one option is also the easiest option you can possibly do. And that's simply to do nothing. At that time, just do nothing. Don't worry about it. Switch off. Chill out a little bit. No, people often forget, and one of my old line managers told me this. He said, people often forget doing nothing is an option. And we forget about this a lot. In this world of social media and constant opinions and need to have a response, to be noticed, to have a voice, to get likes, to get approval, all this stuff everyone seeks, we always forget doing nothing's an option. But I would say that, in short, if you feel an urge to instantly react to a situation, stop. Let go of the impulse. Break that cycle in the way that I explained with the CBT model. Break that cycle. Give yourself to respond when you understand the full picture of why they're doing what they're doing. If someone starts getting involved with you in some sort of an open-ended dialogue that can be fairly, let's say, a bit harsh, a bit abrasive, stop. It's not going to get anyone anywhere. Give yourself time to respond. It doesn't have to be there. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes. It doesn't even have to be that day, not even the meeting. Nothing wrong with just letting someone have their say, trying to understand a bit more of what they want, or what they're trying to say. Ask them a few questions in the same way you would a user. Why are you doing that? Why do you think that? Why are you saying this? Why are you doing this? And then maybe take them to one side afterwards and say, I didn't quite understand what you said in that meeting. Can we have a bit of a chat about it? What we need to look at is creating connections with people that we work with. And again, it comes from that confidence. That word connection is really important, actually. And it's something that I latched onto a few years ago when I read a great book called Johann Hari, and he talks about, it's called Lost Connections, and I recommend it if anyone is interested in a bit further reading. He talks about the need for us as a civilization, as a species, we work together. There's a reason why we are still alive here today, and other species or dinosaurs or whatever aren't roaming the planet. We are not very good as a species by ourselves. We can get outran by the average house cat. We're not particularly intelligent in some respects. We're destroying the planet, and we do a lot of dumb things, and we fight amongst ourselves. And there's probably a good reason why aliens haven't visited us, because they look at us and think we're a bunch of morons. But so fundamentally, we've managed to get this far by sticking together, by working together. In this book, Johann Hari talks about how that's how we are as people. I don't know about anyone else, but I've got a wife and 2 daughters, and whenever I'm away from them and I'm in a hotel room, I can't sleep. I think I'm going to sleep brilliantly, fantastic, have a good night's sleep. I'm an awful sleeper because, and in this book he alludes to it, you haven't got people sitting there kind of subconsciously watching your back, being there for each other, having those things. And right now, in this day and age where we're all sitting behind our screens as we're doing right now, we haven't got the connections we used to have in the offices. We haven't got those little water cooler chats, those little conversations between each other when we leave a meeting room. When I finish a meeting now, I would traditionally, you'd have walked out, you'd have had a laugh, might go for coffee with someone, but now I finish a meeting, thanks a lot, turn off the Teams, and all I'm faced with is this. Complete silence. That's not a nice feeling. So it's more important than ever that we work on these connections. I just want to share this quote from Johann Hari's book. you're an animal whose needs are not being met. And that's why we often find ourselves getting annoyed, probably because we haven't got the connections that we used to have. We need to have a community. We need to have meaningful values that we can find within our community, within our people. So we need to be getting along with each other. We need to be understanding each other and just taking the time to respond rather than just react. I want to share a story, a fable, Fox and the Lion by Aesop. Long time ago. But basically, the story of the fable basically is that we need to work together. We're basically fucked. But he managed to phrase it slightly nicer than I did just then. The story is that there was 4 oxen in a field and a lion, and the oxen realised that if they stuck together, backed themselves up together, as in the picture here, they would survive. The lion stalked them, walked around them, tried to attack them, but it was faced with snarling muscle and just horns, basically, and it couldn't attack them. So the lion, unsure of what to do, wandered off to the corner of the field to think about things a little bit. The oxen stood there and they started to get a bit argue, a bit frustrated. They fell out, a bit bored. They didn't listen to each other, didn't work as a team, and they disappeared off to different areas of the field. Now, once they did that, it took the lion half an hour to pick them off one by one by one by one. Now, the reason why I like this fable can apply to a lot of things in life, but from a business point of view, I used to like to look at it as in the oxen are your team, and the lion is everything that's wrong with a project: lack of resource, lack of time, moving deadlines, all sorts of bad HLSDs, all sorts of bits and bobs that threaten the very effectiveness of your team. And if you don't work together, then the parameters of a project can absolutely destroy a team's performance. And from a UX point of view, again, we need to be mindful that people will just think UX is a luxury, is a not really a waste, but doesn't get things done properly. So again, I often like thinking about this when I'm thinking that why people stress. They're stressed on a project because of the impositions that a project's putting on them. So that's where you need to be stronger. That's where you need to be the 4 oxen together back to back rather than the 4 oxen at the other side of the field. And that's harder nowadays with teams, but we need to try and work on that as a group. I'm going to leave you with a thought here. We often say that as UXers, of course, we should be starting with the needs of our users. But what if we didn't start with the needs of our users, but the needs of our stakeholders? Now, I'm not saying for 1 second ignore the needs of the user. That's pointless. We can still keep the user at the centre of everything we do. But within the team, within the people that we have to work alongside, when you think about their needs, I've talked before about project and product parameters and requirements and issues they could be facing. They may not understand stuff. Like I said, they may look at things from a different viewpoint than you are. So let's look at maybe why they're saying the things they're saying, why they're not coming across as fully understanding as much as you might be. And then you can start to think, okay, well, let's manage this project or product within the parameters of the needs of our stakeholders, but fundamentally keeping the user at the center of it all. And I'll leave you one quote. It's from the book Freedom in Exile by Dalai Lama. This quote isn't 100% specific because when I went to go and actually use the quote, I recall I actually lent my book to someone. I've never had it back. So, but it was basically he was saying this, that if people took, it might not be verbatim, but if people took the time to communicate more effectively, there'll be less conflict in the world. So I want us to think about, if anything you can take away from this presentation would be about effective communication, and it ties right back to one of my key well, it's my how basically that's key to my values of helping people. And I think that if we take our time to understand all the headwinds and issues that our team will experience. I think we could be more better understanding empathetic colleagues as well as empathetic designers, and fundamentally that will be more empathetic for our users at the end of the day. And like one of my old clients said to me, Giles, you can have the best product in the world in the back room, but if you can't get past the Rottweiler at the door, it's a waste of time for everyone. So the more we can communicate, the more we can be empathetic, and the more we can clearly understand our colleagues, the better our role as UXers will be in industry going forward. And we'll pave the way for that younger and newer generation coming through that will fundamentally make the world a better place. And quite frankly, all to look at social media nowadays, the world is going to hell in a handcart. And I think there's an area that we can, as UX people, we can make big strides there. I spoke to about a couple of books in this presentation. Those that know me often know that I tend to advise people to read books that tell you how to think and tell you sort of what to think. And start with Why, Dalai Lama, and Lost Connections. I've thrown in The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell in there as well. That's a good book as well. And I would advise people to look at things like this, as well as obviously the text around user mapping and the journey as well, because this sort of stuff will really help people find their voice and make them stand for something other than just someone who is having their values compromised and probably not instilling the right amount of confidence in people that are needed to within projects. So that's it. Thank you for attending.
So ultimately, Giles, would you say, is it compromise? Is that the message really that you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. It's very what I've seen over the last few years is a lot of designers coming out of boot camps, coming out of how things should be done, learning theory, and that's great. That's brilliant. But other people haven't learned that theory. Other people aren't interested in that theory. They want you to do your job properly. And unless you compromise the theory, like the good words you said, compromise the theory with the way to get people to understand what it is you're trying to achieve and appreciate that people will take time to get on board with you, then that's the way to operate, rather than just projecting your theory on people and hoping that they're just going to get it. And if they don't get it, then you get angry.
Sure. I've seen a couple of hands raised, I think, towards the end there. I don't know if anyone's got any questions or even alternative perspectives they want to share.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paulo. So in the last slide, you said about communication. We are in the communication era, and I think people still don't know how important is communication to these days, and communication is for my daily problems is the most part of my problems in my daily situations, is about communication, and people still don't give the still don't give like how they still don't know how important is communication, and they don't even figure out how important is communication nowadays. So that's what I say from my experience. And what do you guys think about this?
I think it's a very good point, especially what you just said about for a civilization that communicates more than we ever have done, we make a very bad way of actually understanding each other. People don't, in my opinion, listen as much as they probably used to. All you have to do is really speak to an older relative or an older friend, someone 60, 70 years old, and ask them a question, and they'll give you a story. They'll give you almost like a lesson to be learned. And it's a generational thing. And I love talking to my father-in-law, for example, because he'll give me a nice breakdown of the context of what he's talking about. And I believe that in this day and age, people communicate so much on social media that they actually forget that they're not in a WhatsApp group with people. They think they're just spouting off quick, rapid-fire succession, short clip sentences when they're not. They're not. They're actually talking to people who have got concerns and fears and worries about a particular project, or indeed about their home life. And I think it's something that we need to address, quite frankly, and it's certainly something I stand for. Maybe because I talk a shitload, I don't know, but I think it's important to just, if I want to just give people the time of day, make those connections, realizing that you're talking to people, and that's where you're gonna. That's where it's gonna. And that's why I'm not a fan of the word users either. You know, in UX, users sounds like everyone's a drug addict, but you know, you've got to kind of realize that people are customers or what have you, and certain techniques in UX that resonated with me is the whole doing, thinking, feeling process as well, rather than what is someone doing, what are their thoughts, what are their hopes and fears while they're doing this action on some app. You know, I want to find out what makes them tick, what's their why. I think if we don't have that, then I think we lose a whole area, or if we don't train ourselves to understand how to get that out of people, we use a whole area of insight that that we won't be able to tap into to make the digital space much more successful.
Interesting. Would you say, I mean, you got to remember that everyone's got different agendas, I guess, and not everyone's got the same agenda that you have.
Yeah.
I find it interesting because I speak to a lot of UX guys, but I also speak to a lot of developers.
Yeah.
And other people within tech, and I'm always interested to hear what they think of each other. What do UXers think of developers? What's the developers' perspective on UX? And because there's a wrestling match there, really, ultimately, isn't there?
There is, and there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be, because developers and designers, the UXers, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to create something that's good at the end of the day. No one wants to create anything that's rubbish, you know. In my agency land, I used to love working alongside developers. I'd love it. I'd sit there next to them and we'd just hack things together a little bit. And I'd come up with an idea and he'd say, well, I can't really do, if you're doing Magento, let's say, we can't really do that because the layout won't work. I said, well, how about if we do this way? Oh, yeah, that'll work. And then we just used to knock it between each other. When you can start to get developers and designers working, like you've said then, against each other, it's the worst way. It's the worst place to be in. It's the, you know, how can you get two people both trying to do the same thing at opposing ends of the field? That's when you get into the line of the oxen mentality. And it's not good. Sorry, Simon, you've got your hand up.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, everyone. I was just sort of wanted to sort of back up what you're saying a little bit. I personally feel that, you know, I'm not the youngest gentleman in the world. And when I started my career in the 1990s, I think people were more tolerant of each other back then. I think people are far more reactive now. You say the littlest thing and it's just like a bomb going off in the room nowadays. I think people have to be very careful about what they say, how they say it, to whom. And this can utterly destroy people's confidence in you as well. So you, as you're saying, I think the story that you're saying, you can have the best product in the world, but if you can't get past the bulldog at the door, I think you said something along those lines. Yeah. I think that's the perfect analogy. You can be that person with all the answers, but if you can't get people to trust you, if you can't communicate, then you're lost and you're not as valuable as you could be. So I think we all need these communication skills. So the soft skills, I think, are so important today.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine had a UX business, and he got acquired and then he moved away, and he's actually ended up running a business to work on soft skills because he was seeing that in the UX industry. He was seeing a lot of younger designers. I mean, when I was I'm trying not to play the old when I was a lad sort of mentality, but I went through the more traditional art college, A-levels art college, 3-year university degree course where, yeah, how much work do you really do in 3 years in a university degree course? But you learn a lot about other aspects and a lot about other people. And then you started with, I mean, I was in graphic design. You know, there was no money in it. You did it because you love graphic design, simple as that. You know, you didn't do it because you wanted to earn money. I think my first job working in London was £11,000 a year. You know, it's not exactly much money. My eyes water now. I want to see what other people are walking into. But point I'm making is that, yeah, people have forgotten, I think, at how to develop these soft skills. And my friend who was starting this business had seen that had forecasted that in the industry, that a lot of people were coming in off boot camps, a lot of people coming in off 6-month courses and that sort of stuff, and they weren't necessarily learning the finer skills, the critiques. And then in university, you'd have a critique with everyone. Everyone had been encouraged to rip your design to shreds, and you had to sit there and take it. You're actually learning how to take on board that constructive criticism. People haven't got that so much anymore, and it's simply no one's real fault. The industry's gone, but it's certainly one reason why I do my brain station teaching. Everything I try and teach, I do try and layer that on top of it, use real world experiences. And it's the same reason I also set up the game changers that people attended, was literally to be very pragmatic in my approach to design, and say, like, you are going to have people questioning stuff, you are going to have people saying silly things, but you cannot be defensive about it. You have to learn to work with it.
Yeah, the worst thing is when they give you some new requirement, there's just a little extra thing, and suddenly it just throws everything out, and it's almost like, you know, from their point of view, it's just a little thing, but from our point of view, it has a catastrophic effect on and unbalances things. Exactly. and you want to react with emotion, but it's the wrong thing to do.
That's when the do nothing approach. Just do nothing. Just sit there and go, okay, I'll have to go and give that a bit of a thought, and then maybe take it to one side and say, yeah, there needs to be a workaround here, because if you lose it there and then, no one's got any confidence in you. Or even if you don't lose it and you sit there and you roll your eyes, or you look away, or you shrug your shoulders, and people see your body language, it still doesn't help. It's that's when the whole breaking the thought, breaking the reaction, breaking the behavior, that's a big thing that comes into it as well.
Maybe we all need a poker face.
Well, yeah, not a bad idea.
Yeah, I sometimes have to turn my camera off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the amount of times I've done that and my head's been just on my desk, or I just turn my camera off and my microphone. I just type in BRB and I just walk out the room and have a quick 2-minute walk around the house just to try and calm myself down. But yeah, it's tricky. It is tricky, but it's I think, Simon, it's a good point. The way people have possibly forgotten how to be a bit more patient with each other. So it's sort of almost like professional areas with regards the non-traditional route of going through education as we used to have, coupled with the societal mentality of social media and that sort of stuff. It's probably created a bit of a perfect storm.
I think you hit on the educational side of things quite a lot there, and when you contrast that to people coming through in more non-traditional methods, like you say, from the camps and things, and intensive night courses or whatever the case may be, everyone has their own perspective, their own ideas. They get to where they are through whatever influences and influencers that they're listening to.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying the users should still be at the heart of what we do. And so if we remind ourselves of why we're here and what our responsibility is within that, how, we're not, we're hopefully driving towards better designs and communicating that as having benefit and trying to foster a confidence from the people around us and the other teams that we have to interact with. And I think that we need to be more grounded in a sense in the way that we think and feel. So with the fact that you're pointing out, like the Dalai Lama's book, or one of his books, it's that sort of tells me a lot about you. And I can resonate with that, because you get frustrated and it doesn't help, but stop and listen, think about things for a while, talk with other people, sometimes getting a different perspective on things. Sometimes you come back to stuff and you realize, what, there is something more to this. There is always something to learn. So one of my little sayings is, I'm always open. I try to do the open hand things, in a sense, to try and convey I'm open to communication. And I think that's my kind of way of trying to handle things. I try to sort of remember it's not me alone, that we're all a team, we all have input. And, you know, we either all succeed or we all fail. I try to blame everyone, not just me.
Paolo, you got a
Yeah.
question?
Yeah. Sorry. Can I speak right now? You talked about soft skills, you know, and information nowadays is very easy. Everyone can get information. For example, I have 1 year of experience, and someone like have 10 years of experience. We can do the same thing, but the difference is the soft skills that someone has, because I think the only way that you can get soft skill is by time. You know, you cannot. Oh no, I'm gonna learn a soft skill right now and and use it in with my experience. That's why I think the only way to measure soft skill is by time and experience. That's what that's the difference between someone that started for like 10 years and me one year ago, you know. That's why for example, we have a role that needs to do something, but we always get someone that have more experience, not because anyone not knows how to do something better or the same thing, but by the experience time, you know. I think in that way.
You're right. I mean, and it is time. It's time and experience, and I think that's why when you are just largely starting out, one of the key bits of advice I've always given people is just do nothing. That's an easy thing. You don't have to have a sophisticated coping mechanism or some sort of workshop strategy to come back with that takes time to learn. But if you do nothing, take a deep breath, maybe approach people behind the scenes, or just get yourself into a resourceful state rather than unresourceful state, and then come back into the conversation. That will give you the time, because people will keep wanting to work with you. If people don't want to work with you, you don't have the time, you don't have the experience, you'll not be asked to be on another project again. For example, you may even be booted off a project if you're an agency because the client doesn't like you. I've been there before when a client has asked me to go off a project because I was having a bad day. I thought I was fine, but my partner said, "Oh, they don't want the project because they thought you were really rude in the meeting." I was like, "Oh God." And he said it was all my body language was horrific. It was horrific in the meeting. I didn't realise. I thought I was fine, but no, it was bad. So yeah, if I'd maybe have sucked it up, I would have learned a bit more on that project. But yeah, time's what we need.
I just got a notification saying this meeting's going to end in a couple of minutes. I'm not sure whether there's a time limit on it. So sorry, I think we'll have to cut it short. But I guess I'll direct everyone to. I've got this recording, so I can send that to anyone afterwards who've maybe not been here. I can direct people to Giles's LinkedIn page if you're not connected with him already.
Yep. Find me on LinkedIn. I don't go on Twitter because I think it's gutter. But you can find me on LinkedIn though, pootling around in there quite happily, just trying to get involved.
Sure, and I'll be running future sessions as well, probably. So we'll just stay in the loop on that. Sorry to cut things short. I don't know this first one on Teams. I don't know whether there's something in the settings, but I thought I'd flag that before it just shut down. I think we've got 30 seconds left or something. So thanks everyone for coming in. I really appreciate Giles putting this on for me and
Thank you.
taking the time out of your day.
No, thanks for turning everyone. Thank you for some good questions.
Cheers, guys.